The story begins on a late-night flight from Los Angeles to New York. The plane is buzzing with the usual sounds of passengers settling into their seats, zippers being pulled, bags stowed overhead, and quiet murmurs filling the cabin. Among the travelers is a tall man in his mid-30s dressed neatly in a crisp shirt and slacks. He moves with calm confidence as he takes his seat near the front of the aircraft. To anyone watching, he looks like just another traveler heading home after a long day. But what no one knows, not even the people sitting closest to him, is that this man isn't an ordinary passenger. He's actually an undercover federal agent returning from a high-stakes assignment. For now, though, he keeps his identity hidden, blending seamlessly into the crowd. His demeanor is relaxed, almost unassuming, as he places his backpack under the seat in front of him and adjusts his jacket. Across the aisle sits another man, older and wearing an expensive suit. This guy is clearly someone who's used to getting his way. From the moment he boards the plane, his eyes scan the cabin critically, sizing up his fellow passengers. When he notices the well-dressed black man seated nearby, something inside him shifts. Without realizing it, he starts making assumptions, quick judgments based not on facts but on stereotypes he's carried for years. As the plane prepares for takeoff, the older man finds himself growing increasingly uneasy. Every little movement the other passenger makes catches his attention. Did he adjust his bag too quickly? Was that glance at the flight attendant suspicious? None of these actions are out of the ordinary, yet they gnaw at him. His discomfort turns into irritation, then frustration, fueled by prejudices he doesn't even try to hide. By the time the plane lifts off the ground, the tension inside him has reached a boiling point. He can't shake the feeling that the man across the aisle doesn't belong here. What's someone like him doing in first class? He mutters under his breath, loud enough for the person next to him to hear. It's not just curiosity, it's disdain, thinly veiled behind a forced smile whenever their eyes accidentally meet. Meanwhile, the younger man remains oblivious to the scrutiny. Or maybe he's not. Maybe he's noticed the lingering stares and the whispered comments, but he chooses not to react. Instead, he pulls out his phone, scrolling through emails and pretending to focus on work. Inside, though, he's all too familiar with this kind of treatment. He's dealt with it countless times before. People questioning his presence, doubting his abilities, or outright dismissing him because of the color of his skin. For a while, the only sound between them is the low hum of the engines and the occasional shuffle of movement. But the silence doesn't last long. The older man's unease soon gives way to anger, and anger demands action. He decides he won't sit idly by. He needs to do something about the situation. Little does he know, his decision will set off a chain of events neither of them could have predicted. The mood in the cabin shifts subtly as the older man leans over to flag down a flight attendant. With a smug expression, he whispers his concerns, convinced he's doing everyone a favor. What happens next will test his assumptions and reveal more about both men than either of them expected. The older man, still fuming with irritation, waves down a flight attendant as she passes by. She's young, polite, and clearly focused on keeping the cabin calm during the early stages of the flight. Leaning closer to her, he lowers his voice, but speaks loudly enough for those nearby to overhear. "Excuse me," he says, trying to sound casual but failing to mask the edge in his tone. "I need to talk to you about something, privately." The flight attendant pauses, giving him a polite smile. "Of course, sir. How can I assist you?" He glances around briefly, then leans in even closer. "It's about the man sitting across the aisle," he whispers, nodding toward the well-dressed passenger who's quietly scrolling through his phone. "I'm not comfortable with him being here. Something feels off." The flight attendant blinks, taken aback by the vague accusation. "Off? Can you clarify what you mean, sir?" "Well, for starters," he continues, his voice rising slightly, "does he even belong in this section? First-class tickets aren't cheap, and frankly, someone like him doesn't seem like they'd fit in here." He gestures vaguely at the other man's appearance, though there's nothing unusual or out of place about it. His suit is sharp, his posture relaxed, and his behavior perfectly normal. The flight attendant straightens up, her professionalism kicking in. Sir, all passengers have been assigned their seats based on their tickets. If there was an issue, we would have addressed it before takeoff. But the older man isn't satisfied. He presses further, his tone growing more insistent. Look, I'm just saying, he's making me uncomfortable. And if I feel that way, others probably do too. Maybe you should double-check his credentials or something. You know, for safety reasons. His words hang awkwardly in the air, drawing curious glances from nearby passengers. A few people shift uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the tension building. The flight attendant, caught between maintaining protocol and diffusing the situation, offers a reassuring nod. I understand your concern, sir. Let me check with my supervisor to confirm everything is in order. As she walks away, the older man sits back in his seat feeling smug. In his mind, he's done the right thing. Spoken up for what he believes is best for everyone on board. He watches closely as the flight attendant confers with her colleague, near the galley. Their conversation is hushed, but he notices them glance toward him and then toward the man across the aisle. Whatever they're discussing, it seems serious. Meanwhile, the younger man has heard bits and pieces of the exchange. Though he keeps his eyes fixed on his phone, his jaw tightens ever so slightly. He's used to this kind of scrutiny, but that doesn't make it any easier to swallow. Each muttered complaint, each sideways glance chips away at his patience. Still, he chooses not to engage. Instead, he lets out a slow breath and reminds himself that reacting won't change anything. It never does. Back in the galley, the flight attendant explains the situation to her supervisor, a seasoned professional named Tom. This passenger claims he's uncomfortable with the guy across the aisle. He thinks there might be some kind of mistake with his ticket, she says, keeping her voice low. Tom raises an eyebrow. Did he give a specific reason? Not really, she replies. Just said the guy didn't belong here and made him uneasy. Honestly, it sounded like, well, you know. She trails off, unwilling to say the word aloud, but implying exactly what both of them are thinking. Tom sighs, rubbing the back of his neck. Situations like this are tricky. They require tact and care to avoid escalating tensions. All right, let's handle this discreetly, he says finally. We'll go over and verify his boarding pass. That should put the complainer's mind at ease without causing a scene. With that, Tom heads toward the front of the plane where the two men are seated. As he approaches, the older man watches eagerly, convinced that his complaint will lead to action. But what happens next will leave him stunned, and utterly unprepared for the consequences of his own prejudice. Tom stops beside the younger man's seat and clears his throat softly. Excuse me, sir, he begins, his tone polite but firm. Could I trouble you to confirm your reservation details? We just want to ensure everything is correct. The younger man looks up from his phone, meeting Tom's gaze steadily. Without hesitation, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out his wallet. Inside is a neatly folded piece of paper, his boarding pass, as well as something else, a shiny badge with bold letters spelling out FBI. He holds it up briefly, ensuring Tom gets a good look before tucking it back into his wallet. I think this answers your question, the younger man says calmly, his voice carrying a hint of steel beneath its surface. Is there anything else you need? Tom freezes, his eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, he struggles to find the right words. No, sir. Everything appears to be in order. My apologies for disturbing you. As Tom retreats, the older man catches sight of the badge and his face drains of color. All the bravado he felt moments ago evaporates, replaced by a sinking realization. The man he accused of not belonging here isn't just another traveler. He's a federal agent. And now, thanks to his own actions, he's about to face the full weight of his mistake. Tom, the supervisor, quickly retreats to the galley, his mind racing as he tries to process what just happened. He's been in the airline industry for years, handling everything from unruly passengers to medical emergencies. But this is a first. The man sitting calmly across the aisle isn't just any traveler. He's an FBI agent. Tom knows better than to make assumptions or escalate things further. Still, he can't shake the feeling that the situation is about to get even more complicated. Meanwhile, the older man watches every move like a hawk. His initial smugness has turned into something else entirely. Curiosity mixed with growing unease. He saw the badge too, though only for a split second. At first, he thinks maybe he imagined it. But no, the look on the supervisor's face confirms it. That calm, collected passenger isn't who he thought he was. Panic begins to creep in. The older man shifts uncomfortably in his seat, his expensive suit suddenly feeling too tight. His mind races through all the things he said earlier, the whispered complaints, the thinly veiled accusations. What if the agent heard him? Worse, what if the entire cabin did? He glances around nervously, noticing a few passengers exchanging looks and whispering among themselves. Some seem amused, while others appear annoyed by the disruption. Unable to sit still, he flags down the flight attendant again. "Excuse me," he says, his voice louder this time, tinged with desperation. "Who is that guy? What's going on here?" The flight attendant, still processing her own shock, hesitates before answering. She doesn't want to cause more drama, but she also knows lying isn't an option. "Sir," she says firmly, keeping her tone neutral. "He's a federal agent, and honestly, I think you should leave this alone before things escalate further." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. A federal agent. The phrase echoes in his head, each syllable heavier than the last. He feels a cold sweat break out on his forehead. All the confidence he had moments ago evaporates completely. Now he's left with nothing but regret and fear. But instead of backing down, his ego kicks in. He tells himself there's still a way to fix this, to smooth things over before they spiral out of control. Gathering what little courage he has left, he leans across the aisle toward the younger man. Hey," he stammers, his voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to say, sorry if I caused any trouble earlier. I didn't mean anything by it." The younger man looks up from his phone, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the cabin seems eerily quiet, as if everyone is holding their breath. Then, with a slow, deliberate smile, the agent cuts him off. "Save it," he says coolly, his voice low but firm. "Let's just get through this flight without any more drama." His words land like a hammer, leaving the older man speechless. There's no room for argument, no chance to explain himself. The younger man's tone makes it clear that the matter is closed. Defeated, the older man slinks back into his seat, his face burning with shame. For the rest of the flight, the tension in the cabin is palpable. Every creak of the plane, every rustle of movement feels amplified. The older man squirms in his seat, unable to focus on anything but the weight of his mistake. Each time the younger man adjusts his position, even something as simple as reaching for a bottle of water, the older man flinches, half expecting some kind of retaliation. Passengers nearby have picked up on the awkward energy. Some exchange knowing glances while others openly roll their eyes at the spectacle. One woman, seated a few rows behind, mutters under her breath, loud enough for those around her to hear. "Some people really don't think before they speak." Her comment earns nods of agreement from her neighbors. As the hours drag on, the older man becomes increasingly paranoid. He imagines whispers and stares directed at him, even when no one is paying attention. His thoughts spiral, replaying every word he said and wondering how much damage he's done. Will the agent report him? Could this affect his job, his reputation, his life? The uncertainty gnaws at him, making it impossible to relax. At one point, the flight attendant passes by again, offering drinks. When she reaches the older man, he forces a weak smile and asks for a glass of water. She hands it to him silently, her expression giving nothing away. But as she walks away, he notices her shake her head ever so slightly, a subtle judgment that cuts deeper than any harsh words could. Meanwhile, the younger man remains unfazed. He continues scrolling through his phone, occasionally jotting down notes or sipping from a cup of coffee. To anyone watching, he appears completely at ease, as if the entire incident never happened. But deep down, he's acutely aware of the older man's discomfort. It's not satisfaction he feels. It's more like resignation. He's seen this kind of behavior before, and he knows it won't disappear overnight. Still, there's a small sense of vindication in knowing that justice, however minor, has been served. As the plane begins its descent into New York, The older man braces himself for what comes next. He knows he'll have to face the younger man again, this time outside the confines of the aircraft. The thought fills him with dread. Whatever happens after they land, one thing is certain. This flight will stay etched in his memory for a very long time. As the plane finally touches down at JFK Airport, the cabin erupts into the usual post-landing shuffle. Passengers stretch their legs, gather their belongings, and prepare to disembark. For most people, it's just another routine end to a long flight. But for the older man, every second feels like an eternity. His stomach churns with anxiety as he watches the younger man rise from his seat and calmly retrieve his backpack from under the seat in front of him. The agent moves with purpose, his demeanor as composed as it was when he first boarded the plane. The older man lingers awkwardly in his seat, pretending to check his phone or adjust his jacket, anything to delay standing up. He knows that once they're off the plane, there's no telling what might happen. Will the agent confront him, report him to authorities, or worse, publicly call him out in front of everyone? These questions swirl in his mind, making it hard to focus on anything else. When the aisle clears enough for passengers to start exiting, the older man hesitates before finally standing. He keeps his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone, especially the younger man. As he shuffles toward the exit, he can feel eyes on him, not just from fellow passengers but also from the flight attendants who witnessed the earlier scene. Their expressions are unreadable, but he imagines judgment in every glance. Outside the aircraft, chaos reigns as travelers jostle through the jet bridge and into the terminal. The younger man walks ahead, moving swiftly and confidently. The older man trails behind, struggling to keep up while simultaneously trying to stay inconspicuous. His paranoia grows with each step. Every time someone bumps into him or glances his way, he wonders if word of his behavior has already spread. At baggage claim, the younger man stands near the carousel, scrolling through his phone again. The older man tries to blend into the crowd, keeping his distance but unable to resist sneaking occasional looks. He notices how effortlessly the younger man commands respect, even without saying a word. There's something about his presence, an air of authority, that makes people instinctively give him space. It's intimidating, to say the least. After retrieving his bag, the younger man heads toward the exit. The older man follows reluctantly, dreading the moment when their paths will cross again. Sure enough, just outside the terminal doors, the inevitable happens. The younger man pauses briefly to hail a taxi, and the older man finds himself standing mere feet away, fumbling with his own suitcase. For a moment, neither speaks. Then, almost casually, the younger man turns and locks eyes with him. His expression is calm, almost amused, as if he's been waiting for this exact moment. "Next time," he says, his voice low but clear enough to cut through the noise of the bustling airport, "maybe think twice before assuming someone doesn't belong where they are." The words hit the older man like a punch to the chest. They're simple yet devastating, leaving no room for argument or denial. Before he can respond, even if he had the courage to try, the younger man steps forward as a black SUV pulls up to the curb. Its tinted windows and subtle FBI insignia leave no doubt about its purpose. With one last glance over his shoulder, the agent climbs inside, closing the door behind him. The SUV drives off smoothly, disappearing into the sea of vehicles. Left standing alone on the curb, the older man feels utterly exposed. His face burns with shame, and his hands tremble slightly as he grips the handle of his suitcase. Passers-by glance at him curiously, some with raised eyebrows, others with outright disdain. He realizes now that his actions didn't go unnoticed. They've become part of the collective memory of everyone who witnessed them. Desperate to escape the spotlight, he hails a cab and climbs inside, sinking into the back seat with a heavy sigh. The driver glances at him in the rearview mirror, clearly puzzled by his disheveled appearance. "Rough flight?" the driver asks lightly, attempting small talk. The older man forces a weak laugh, though it comes out more like a groan. "You could say that," he mutters, staring out the window as the cityscape blurs past. Inside, he replays the events of the flight over and over again, each detail sharper and more humiliating than the last. What started as a petty complaint has spiraled into a lesson he'll never forget. A lesson delivered not by force, but by dignity and poise. Back home later that evening, the older man sits alone in his living room, nursing a glass of whiskey. The weight of the day presses down on him, heavier than he ever imagined. He thinks about the agent's final words. Think twice before assuming someone doesn't belong. It wasn't just advice, it was a warning, a reminder that prejudice carries consequences whether immediate or delayed. For hours he sits there replaying the scene in his mind, the badge, the calm delivery of those cutting words, the way the SUV drove off without hesitation. All of it serves as a mirror reflecting his own biases back at him. And though he may not admit it aloud, deep down, he knows he deserves every ounce of discomfort he feels. The days following the flight pass slowly for the older man, each one dragging on like a never-ending loop of self-reflection and regret. At first he tries to push the incident out of his mind, convincing himself it was just a fleeting moment, a hiccup in an otherwise ordinary week. But no matter how hard he works to distract himself, fragments of that day keep creeping back into his thoughts. The agent's calm demeanor, the badge glinting under the cabin lights, the SUV pulling away, all of it replays in vivid detail, haunting him. By the third day, he can't take it anymore. The weight of what happened feels unbearable, pressing down on him like a storm cloud refusing to break. Desperate for some kind of release, he decides to confide in someone. He chooses a colleague at work, someone he considers a close friend, or at least as close as two people can be in their line of business. Over lunch in a quiet corner of the office cafeteria, he begins to recount the story, carefully omitting certain details while exaggerating others. So there I was, he starts, leaning forward slightly, just minding my own business on the plane. Everything seemed fine until this guy across the aisle started acting strange. He pauses, searching for the right word. Not suspicious exactly, but off. You know what I mean? His colleague raises an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Off? Like how? Well, for starters, he didn't look like your typical first-class passenger, he says, waving his hand vaguely. I mean, come on, how many times do you see someone like him up front? It just felt wrong. His colleague takes a sip of coffee, setting the cup down with deliberate slowness. Someone like him? She repeats, her tone sharper now. What does that even mean? Caught off guard, the older man stammers, realizing too late that he's treading dangerous ground. You know, not dressed fancy enough, I guess, just out of place. She stares at him for a long moment before shaking her head. Wow, that's rich coming from you. Are we really doing this again? Her reaction stings more than he expected. Doing what? He asks defensively. I'm just saying, I had concerns, okay? And turns out I wasn't completely wrong. Oh, please, she shoots back, her voice rising slightly. Don't try to justify yourself now. What happened after you made your little complaint? Did security throw him off? The plane? Or did something else happen that made you look like an idiot? He shifts uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding her gaze. It's not like that, he mutters. He turned out to be, well, let's just say he wasn't who I thought he was. Let me guess, she interrupts, crossing her arms. He flashed a badge, didn't he? Maybe FBI or something? The older man freezes, caught red-handed. How did you? Because this isn't the first time I've heard a story like yours. She cuts him off, her voice dripping with disdain. People like you always think they're protecting everyone by pointing fingers. But all you're doing is exposing your own biases. Honestly, I don't feel sorry for you. You got exactly what you deserved. Her words hit him like a slap across the face. He opens his mouth to argue, to defend himself, but nothing comes out. Instead, he sits there silently, staring at his half-eaten sandwich as shame washes over him. For the first time, he sees himself through someone else's eyes, not as the confident businessman he pretends to be, but as the prejudiced, judgmental person he truly is. Later that evening, as he lies awake in bed, her voice echoes in his mind. You got exactly what you deserved. Those 7 words linger, gnawing at him like a relentless ache. He thinks about the agent, the way he carried himself with quiet authority, the way he delivered that final blow without raising his voice. There was no anger in his tone, no malice in his actions, just pure, unshakable confidence. And yet, it left the older man feeling smaller than any shouted insult ever could. Over the next few weeks, the memory of the flight continues to haunt him. He finds himself replaying every interaction, dissecting every decision he made. Why did he feel the need to complain in the first place? What made him so quick to judge someone based on appearances? The answers are uncomfortable, forcing him to confront parts of himself he'd rather ignore. At work, he becomes quieter, less eager to share opinions during meetings. Colleagues notice the change but don't press him about it. Outside of work, he avoids social gatherings, preferring solitude over small talk. Even when he ventures out, he can't shake the feeling that people are watching him, judging him. Every glance in his direction feels loaded with meaning, whether real or imagined. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, he stumbles upon an article about unconscious bias and its impact on everyday interactions. Intrigued, and perhaps secretly hoping to find justification for his behavior, he clicks on it. As he reads, however, he realizes the piece is less about excusing prejudice and more about recognizing and addressing it. One section stands out to him in particular. Bias often operates beneath the surface, shaping our decisions without us even realizing it. The key to overcoming it lies in self-awareness, acknowledging where these biases come from and actively working to challenge them. For the first time in weeks, he feels a flicker of hope. Maybe this doesn't have to define him forever. Maybe there's still a chance to grow, to learn from his mistakes. It won't be easy, undoing years of ingrained beliefs rarely is, but the idea gives him something to hold on to. Determined to make a change, he starts small. He begins paying closer attention to his thoughts, catching himself whenever he makes snap judgments about someone. When he catches a coworker rolling her eyes at another meeting comment, he reminds himself that not everyone shares his perspective. Slowly but surely, he learns to listen more and assume less. Months later, he runs into his colleague from the cafeteria again. This time, instead of avoiding her gaze, he approaches her with genuine humility. "Hey," he says, clearing his throat nervously. "Remember that conversation we had a while back? About the flight?" She looks up from her laptop, surprised. "Yeah, what about it?" "I just wanted to say, you were right. I messed up and I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I'm trying to do better, though. It's not going to happen overnight, but yeah." To his relief, she smiles faintly. "Good. That's all anyone can ask for. To acknowledge when you're wrong and try to fix it." As he walks away, he feels a sense of lightness he hasn't felt in months. It's not absolution. He knows he'll carry the memory of that flight for the rest of his life. But it's progress. And for now, that's enough. Life moves forward for both men, though in vastly different ways. For the older man, the days turn into weeks and the weeks stretch into months. The incident on the flight doesn't fade entirely. It lingers like a scar, a constant reminder of how quickly assumptions can spiral out of control. At first, he tries to bury it deep, pretending it never happened. But as time passes, he realizes that ignoring the problem won't make it go away. Instead, it forces him to confront something much bigger than himself, the biases he's carried for years without even realizing it. One evening, sitting alone in his apartment with a cup of coffee, he decides to write down his thoughts. It starts as a simple exercise, a way to process everything, but soon turns into something more. He writes about the flight, about the agent, about the shame that still prickles at the back of his mind whenever he thinks about what he said. Then, he begins reflecting on other moments in his life when he might have judged someone unfairly, a cashier who seemed distracted, a coworker whose accent made him pause, a stranger on the street whose appearance didn't match his expectations. Each memory feels heavier than the last, piling up until he can't ignore them anymore. What surprises him most is how writing helps. Putting words to paper makes the abstract concrete, forcing him to face truths he's spent years avoiding. He starts reading books about bias, privilege, and systemic inequality, not because he wants to, but because he feels like he has to. Slowly, he begins to understand that his actions weren't just personal. They were part of a larger pattern, one that affects countless people every single day. At work, he becomes quieter, more observant. During meetings, instead of jumping in with opinions right away, he listens. When colleagues share ideas, he asks questions rather than making assumptions. His co-workers notice the change, though they don't say anything outright. One day, a younger team member approaches him after a presentation. "Hey," she says hesitantly, "I just wanted to say, I've noticed you've been really supportive lately. Thanks for listening." Her words catch him off guard, but they also fill him with a sense of quiet pride. For the first time in a long while, he feels like he's doing something right, even if it's small. He smiles and nods, saying simply, "Just trying to be better." Outside of work, he finds himself paying closer attention to the world around him. On his daily commute, he watches interactions between strangers, how some are kind, others dismissive, and still others indifferent. He notices the subtle ways people treat each other differently based on race, gender, age, and appearance. Sometimes, it frustrates him. Other times, it motivates him to keep learning, to keep growing. Months later, during a family dinner, the topic of prejudice comes up. His sister-in-law mentions an article she read about racial profiling, sparking a heated debate among the group. Voices rise, tempers flare, and opinions clash. For most of the conversation, he stays silent, letting others do the talking. But when someone makes a comment about people needing to earn respect, he speaks up for the first time. "Respect isn't something you earn," he says firmly, surprising even himself. "It's something you give freely. If we wait for people to prove themselves before treating them fairly, we're missing the point." The table falls silent, everyone turning to look at him. His brother raises an eyebrow. "Since when did you become such a philosopher?" he jokes, breaking the tension. The older man shrugs, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I'm just saying, maybe we could all do a little better." Meanwhile, the agent's life continues as usual. To him, the flight was nothing more than a minor inconvenience, a fleeting moment of ignorance in a career filled with far greater challenges. He doesn't dwell on it, nor does he hold any lingering resentment toward the older man. In fact, he barely thinks about it at all. What happened on that plane is just another example of the kinds of encounters he's faced throughout his life, and one he knows others like him experience far too often. Still, there's a small sense of satisfaction in knowing that justice, however minor, was served. The look on the older man's face when he realized who he was dealing with, that brief flash of panic, was enough to remind the agent why staying calm and composed always pays off. Drama and anger rarely solve anything, but dignity and authority, those leave a lasting impression. In his line of work, the agent has learned to focus on what truly matters: protecting the public, upholding the law, and ensuring fairness for everyone. Personal slights don't faze him because he knows they're not about him. They're about the other person's insecurities and fears. So while the older man wrestles with guilt and regret, the agent remains unfazed, moving through life with the same steady confidence that earned him respect from passengers and colleagues alike. Years pass, and the two men never cross paths again. But the ripple effects of their encounter continue to shape them in profound ways. For the older man, it becomes a turning point, a catalyst for growth and self-awareness. He may never fully shed the biases he's carried for so long, but he commits to challenging them whenever they surface. Whether it's speaking up against unfair treatment at work or simply smiling at a stranger on the street, he learns to approach the world with a little more empathy and a lot less judgment. For the agent, the incident fades into the background, blending into the tapestry of experiences that define his life. Yet every now and then he'll think back to that flight and allow himself a small, private smile. Not because he enjoys seeing others fail, but because moments like those remind him of the power of grace under pressure. In a world where prejudice and ignorance often take center stage, staying calm and collected sends a message louder than any argument ever could. As their lives unfold separately, Both men carry lessons from that night with them. For one, it's a reminder of the harm caused by unchecked assumptions. For the other, it's proof that dignity and poise can speak volumes without saying a word. And though they may never meet again, the memory of that flight serves as a bridge connecting them, a shared moment that changed them both in ways neither could have predicted. In the end, the story isn't just about one man's mistake or another's triumph. It's about the choices we make, the lessons we learn, and the impact those moments have on the people around us. Because sometimes, all it takes is a single interaction to spark change, even if it happens 35,000 feet above the ground.